Chuck in Fullerton, California. You were religious, you left the Mormon church, you read the Bible, and oh, wow, right? I mean, you're on with Jen and Tracie, and go ahead and let off some steam for a few minutes, and then we'll get to the next call.
Well, I just thought maybe a rejection of the Bible in the Bible would be good information to share with deluded Christians.
Good luck.
Well, yeah.
Good luck with that.
The thing is that
I'm going to give you the quotations.
Yeah. I'm guaranteeing you it's been done, but feel free, because sometimes people haven't heard it before, so give it your best shot.
In Genesis, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and there was darkness on the face of the deep, and God said, let there be light. And the light he called day, and the dark he called night, and he thought that was pretty good. Mm-hmm. But he didn't create the sun and the moon until the fourth day.
Yep.
Yeah.
How can you have an evening and a morning for 3 days without a sun and a moon?
Because time is relative with God.
Yeah. He's outside of time and space.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next. In Genesis, I think 6 something, it says, and God said it's not good that man should be alone. I call that discovery. I call that God learning something.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But how could God be omnipotent if he can still learn things?
Not all people think that God is omnipotent.
Yeah.
He goes on to say, so out of the dust of the ground, he creates all the beasts of the field, all the birds of the sky, and all the creepy crawly things, and they brought them to Adam, and whatever Adam called them, that's what they were called. But there was not found for Adam a helpmate.
Right.
Called that failure.
None of them were sufficient partners, which I thought was very interesting, because what if Adam would have really dug the horse, right? I mean, it's like, I love this thing, we're calling it horse, and this is the one for me, right? We're pair bonded.
He set out to create Adam a helpmeet, and he failed.
Yeah.
But then the next little phrase says, he out of the dust of the ground, he created all the beasts of the fields. And so he caused Adam to fall into a deep sleep, and then he took one of Adam's ribs. So not only did God fail, he was working in the wrong medium. He was working in dust when he should have been working in ribs.
I guess. I mean, he was working, and the dust worked for making man, so I guess he figured all these other animals would be just as good.
Well, that's the point. The point is that the Bible says God failed.
Well, it says he doesn't know. It says he doesn't know stuff either. When he makes the flood, it's because he regrets making man, right? What is a regret for somebody that has foresight?
I'm sure that there are many errors in the Bible.
Because
it was written by man.
Well, and the thing is that flood story, though, to realize that you've made such a major mistake.
Hang on. And then we can...
Hold on a minute. Jen wants to make an observation.
So that flood story is such a major fuck up, because how bad do you have to screw up to realize that not only have you messed up a few people here, but you've got to erase the whole world.
That was a do-over. I mean, let's just face it. That was a big divine do-over. Like, I screwed the pooch on this one, and we need a do-over.
The next one is my last one is about the flood.
Okay.
If you read Genesis 7:6, you will find out that Noah's Shem, Ham, and Japheth, that's, I guess, his 3 sons, was born when Noah was 500 years old.
Pretty amazing.
And 100 years later, when Noah was 600 years old, is when the flood came. But if you read Genesis 11:10 all the way through, you will find a 2-year error in when Shem's first offspring was born. That he was born when Shem was 100 years old, 2 years before the flood. And it's a 2-year error in the Bible.
Have you Googled it?
Have I Googled it?
Yeah.
I've got the Bible here in front of me.
No, I'm saying, have you Googled to see the apologetic response to it?
No.
You need to do that. I can almost guarantee you that whatever a person can come up with that is a quote error in the Bible, there is going to be an apologist somewhere who says this is why this is not an error in the Bible. I am pretty confident that I would be stunned if somebody came up with anything that was new that a person who is a believer hasn't said, here's why this is not a mistake. They already have it. And so what happens is you'll tell a theist this stuff. You'll say, look, it's a mistake. And they'll be like, whoa. And then they go online and Google it. That's the first thing they're going to do, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to find a preacher who's written a sermon who talks about this stuff and who says this is not an error and this is why. And they're going to make the necessary connections and hoops to jump through in order to explain why something that seems like a straightforward mistake isn't.
You didn't like the... God was working in the wrong medium. He was working.
Well, it's not about me liking it or not. I'm simply telling you that.
Well, I mean, why would anybody? How could this Bible?
You're preaching to the choir, dude. You're preaching to the choir. What you need to do, if you have the question, why would anybody believe this, or why would anybody, do they not know this? I'm saying go and Google, and you'll see if they know it or not, if somebody's addressed it. And I'm going to say that they probably have, right? I know that this is kind of new to you because you're looking at it and you're going, oh my gosh, this is so messed up. And that's the reaction of many people who read the Bible for the first time, right? If you haven't been raised in religion. But what you'll find as well is that there is going to be an apologist somewhere online who has written an article so that when you call this out, the Christian is going to go to that article, they're going to see this sort of half-assed explanation, and they're going to say, good enough for me, it's not a mistake, here's this article.
I was going to preface my little sermon here with, this was aimed at the deluded Christians.
I understand.
Yes.
And they're the ones that are going to go Google what the apologist
says. The thing is,
says.
though, they're not deluded. They don't suffer from delusions. Okay, they're indoctrinated, and that's why they believe the things they believe.
The result of indoctrination is delusion.
No, it isn't. Delusion is actually a mental illness, and this is not delusion.
Delusion is a mental illness?
Yes.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yeah, actually
delusion
it is.
Is just being deceived. That's not a mental illness.
Okay, there's a colloquial term and there's like a diagnostic term. And I think what Jen is kind of pointing out is that there are some people who deal with mental illness that might take issue with the idea of using something that can also be a diagnosis. I get it. But the point is, for you, and I get it, for you this is new, and so you're just like, what the hell? Like, you're looking at what's in the Bible and it's stunning to you. And every atheist who reads the Bible or who sees these errors is just like, what the heck? This is stunning that it's so messed up. And when they go and present it to a Christian, the first thing the Christian is going to do is go and look for the religious response to it online. They're going to find the religious response to it. They're going to come back to you with that response and say, here's my answer, cut and paste. And
I have noticed that whenever you try to convince somebody of something, it almost always drives them farther into their delusion, their deception. They're being deceived. In other words, they go and try to find somebody who will give them an answer.
Well, this is why I tend to, and like I say, this is what, like from the earlier call at the start of the show, I can't tell people what to do. But what I can say is that I have not found it productive to try to argue with Christians from the Bible. It becomes a quagmire of them just looking for excuses for why the Bible is okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what I tend to do is just say, I'm not accepting the Bible unless we can verify that what's in it is accurate.
There is a phrase that I think is apropos here, and that is, they are accepting authority as the truth instead of the truth as authority.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. But just like when the guy called us and was trying to tell us what we believe because we use the atheist label, and so we must believe.
That was the most boring part of the show.
Well, but at the same time, if you're going to go to people and tell them that their book has contradictions, you need to understand how they view the book. And you need to understand how they interpret these things that you're saying are contradictions. 2 and 2 is 4. I agree, but what I'm saying is that if you're going to go to them, you're going to need to understand how they think and how
I've taken this to many people, and, they just want to change the subject.
Well, yeah, and like Tracie's saying that, arguing the Bible with Christians is not a productive way of deconverting them in most cases.
Yeah, it means many things to many people. Like you're saying 2 + 2 = 4, but the Bible is not a mathematical problem.
But here's the thing, Chuck. According to your own statement here, you didn't deconvert because of what you read in the Bible. You deconverted and then you read the Bible.
Yeah.
Well, I've read the Bible many times before I deconverted. It's just that the deconversion process took about 6, 7, 8 years.
Okay.
I first of all decided that Jesus Christ never existed.
Right.
And then I continued to make excuses for, the God, to make God what has been, I've learned later, is called a deist, a God who doesn't care. He created the earth and he created the people, but he doesn't answer prayers, and, he's not there, watching you if you masturbate, in the bathroom.
Mm-hmm.
But then as I went on farther and farther, with knowing the history of the Catholic Church and other religions and the way they change when the political atmosphere changes, the way that the Catholic Church embraced the Nazis in the 40s, that you come to say that God never existed. I mean, there was no God. We are here, I guess, until we find out how we got here. We were here as a result of accidents, the whatever sequence of events that took place that created life. Well, okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, and I do want to say, I mean, people grapple with this when they first become atheists, right? So there's a lot of things that you do, like he's describing reading the Bible. There were things that I read, a lot of treatises, books that talked about certain aspects of the Bible, certain parts of the Bible. And I would hear a claim in one of these books from a historian or something, like somebody that was studying, Jewish folklore or whatever, and they would say that the Bible said this or that. And I'd be like, no, that's not what it said, because I remember that story. And I'd go back to the Bible and I'd read it, and they were totally right. It was this weird experience, right, where you're seeing the same story that you read a million times, and suddenly you see that it didn't say what you thought it said. And it's the most bizarre thing, because then you sort of realize how messed up, what indoctrination did to your head. People, it can really be a almost frightening experience, right? Because you're saying, how did I always read it this way? And they told me this other thing, and then that's how it became that story to me. But it's not that story. They told me that's what the story was saying, and so I read that, and that's what the story was saying. And now somebody's telling me, if you just read it, that's not what it says, and I'm just reading it, and they're not telling me what it's saying anymore, and it doesn't say what they said.
Right.
It's the weirdest thing. And so I want to just give a little bit of, sympathy to our caller here, because it is shocking. And when you encounter this as somebody who was like a former believer, especially, I think you said he was a Mormon. And so when you're in this very deep state of church and you come out and you start looking at this information again and realizing it is nothing like what you thought it was, there was this weird, surreal interpretation of things that you fell into because you were told to interpret it this way when you were little. And so you think other people aren't reading it right, when in reality, someone has told you to read it a particular way, and that becomes the way you read it. And then when you start to see that it doesn't really say that they've just told you it says that, it's strange.
Yeah, and I even had this, and it's kind of a surreal experience, sitting in front of an apologist who was telling me that the Bible is the literal word of God. It's meant to be taken literally, and you don't need any interpretation. And he goes and he reads me a passage, and then he turns and he says, now what this means is...
Yeah, you have to read it with the right way. You got to understand with understanding, the right understanding. And that's what that means, right? You have to read it in the way that we've told you to read it. And what... so I know when a caller comes on like that, and I'm guilty of it, like I just kind of was like, okay, here we go again, because I've seen this a million times, and it's very difficult to convert somebody. I do appreciate, for example, Matt's discussions on slavery and stuff like that. When a Christian is clearly misrepresenting what's in the Bible, and when you can come back and say, no, this is actually right here. Let me read the verse for you. Let me look at the context, and and you're just simply wrong about what's in your Bible. But what he's dealing with, most certainly the Christians are going to go look at the apologetic response, come back with it. It is a very, very difficult thing to argue the Bible with a Christian. You are going to get into a quagmire of interpretations. Right. The fact that Christians themselves of many sects are arguing about what's in their own Bibles should give you a clue that an argument with Christians about what's in the Bible is going to be a mess.
And at the end of it, it's going to come down to, well, I just have faith, or even
if you get somewhere, even if you corner somebody, you be prepared for, and I still believe in God, because that happens too. I'm not going to tell people don't try. Mm-hmm. And I'm even going to say that there are some people who can probably say, hey, I argued with somebody and showed them stuff in the Bible, and ultimately they ended up not believing anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Right.
I'm just saying know the pitfalls, right? Be aware and don't just think like that you found that one aha verse that's going to work on the Christians and now it's all going to topple. It's not how it works.
Yeah.